folks, for today's craft, I'm going to show you how to make a Illinois home pallet sign. We had a limited number of kits available at the drive-up window, and each kit had enough materials to create one pallet sign. Depending on how you use the stencil, you can either have the whitewashed look for your pallet or the more traditional farmhouse look. The kits included one 10-inch wood pallet. We did not seal the wood. You might want to consider doing that before starting your project. Sealing the wood first will prevent the wood chip from chipping when you use your stencil. We also included a pre-cut but not weeded Illinois stencil, and depending on how you use this, that's how you get the different effects on your palette. We also included a piece of transfer tape to use with your Illinois stencil, and then we included one pre-cut and ready to transfer home stencil for your palette. Also included are some paints. We added white and blue paints and some foam brushes. And once you have all your materials, you're ready to get started. The first step for our pallet sign is going to be to paint the Illinois shape onto our wood. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, there's two ways you can do this. I'm actually going to do it where I'm going to whitewash the background and the Illinois shape is going to be the wood color. The reason I'm doing this is it kind of has a more rustic farmhouse look, but you could do the opposite effect where your background is wood and your Illinois shape is white. So in my case, I want to block out the Illinois shape. So what I'm going to do is actually remove the big blue square here. And you want to make sure that when you peel it, you're not taking your Illinois shape away. You want the Illinois shape to stay stuck to this white piece. And if you peel nicely, you can actually set this aside and use it for another project. So I'm just going to gently set this down to the side on my table. And so this is the piece that I need for my project. And so once you've done your peeling, you're going to take the transfer tape that came in your kit. And so transfer tape is basically just giant pieces of tape. And what we're going to do is we're going to peel this tape, stick it onto the stencil, and use it to move the stencil onto our wood so we don't risk ripping the stencil. So I'm going to go ahead and peel this transfer tape. It is curly, so you want to be kind of careful that you don't end up getting it tangled. And I'm going to take my giant piece of transfer tape, and with the sticky side down, I'm going to stick it to my blue stencil. And I want to avoid wrinkles, but if there are wrinkles or if it is off-centered or not straight, that's fine, because we're just using it to position it onto the wood. So once it's stuck to my stencil, I'm just going to apply a little bit of pressure to make sure that the blue really sticks to the transfer tape. And then I'm going to peel the transfer tape away. And I want to make sure that my blue stencil sticks to the transfer tape and peels off the white. So you should hopefully have a giant piece of transfer tape with your Illinois shape. And this white could be tossed away in the garbage. So now I'm going to get ready to position my Illinois shape. I have the hook part of my sign here, so I want to make sure that I'm putting this on the right way. And you want to center it as best as you can. I'm just going to eyeball this. So you can either measure and mark where exactly you want it to be so it's center, or you can eyeball it like I'm doing. So I have approximately 2.5 to 3 inches on either side of the state, and approximately 1/2 to 2/3 of an inch from the top and the bottom. And now that I have it kind of centered where I want, I'm going to push it down. And I care mostly about this blue piece sticking to the wood. So I'm going to apply pressure where the blue is. with my finger, or you can use your library card or a gift card or a credit card, some sort of scraper to kind of help apply pressure. And now that I've stuck that blue to the wood, hopefully pretty well, I'm going to gently peel my clear tape away. Anytime you do a wood project, you want to be careful when you're peeling away. You want to be as gentle as possible so you don't chip your wood or your paint. One thing you can do in between steps to help reduce chipping is to seal your wood or your paint in between steps. We did not seal the wood in your kit, so if you wanted to, you have to do that first before doing this step. So I'm going to peel away, and it's okay if the blue starts to peel up just a little bit because we can fix that before painting. We just want to make sure that it stays mostly in place. So this transfer tape, you're mostly done with, but if you wanted to reuse it with that other piece of stencil, you could, as long as you're being careful. So I'm going to set that aside. And so at this point, I'm going to just smooth down my stencil and try and get any bubbles out so it has a pretty firm seal on the wood. Once you have your stencil stuck to the wood, it's ready to do the painting step. So we have a little bit of white acrylic paint in your craft kit and some foam brushes. You want to go ahead and take a foam brush and your paint, and we are going to paint this back piece. Now with whitewashing, the trick is to use a little bit of paint. The idea is to have that rustic paint worn out look. So you don't want to apply too much. So little is better than more. If you decided to do the opposite effect where you're painting the state, it's better to paint the state in solid. So you're going to end up using more paint if you're doing that design option. So I'm just going to dab my foam brush, and I'm just going to start brushing. And again, the idea is to have kind of this worn look. So you don't want to have a lot of solid parts where there's a lot of paint. Hopefully when you're done, you should have some sort of whitewashed rustic look effect going on. Another way you can achieve this effect or make it even look more distressed is to take some sandpaper and sand down where you've painted, especially in areas where the paint might be more white or solid, to kind of really get that worn rustic farmhouse look. You're going to want to let this dry before sanding and before removing the stencil. So we're going to set this aside for a couple hours. Since it's not a lot of paint, this should dry pretty quickly. But you want to make sure it's fully dry before we remove the stencil and move on to the next step. The way that I'm showing you how to make a palette is this way, with your background of your wood whitewashed and the shape of Illinois wood color. But you could do the opposite by removing your Illinois shape from the stencil and sticking your transfer paper to this stencil and using it on your palette to paint in the color of your Illinois shape. So for this method, we would use the stencil. Again, I'm just eyeballing the placement. And so using the stencil in this way and painting this part white would give you the opposite version of your palette sign. So for the other way you can make the pallet sign, you would paint in the Illinois shape. So I went ahead and did that, and I'm gonna set this aside to let it dry before moving on to the next step. So you should have a stencil vinyl with the word home on it, and it should already be pre-weeded for you with some transfer tape stuck on it. So you're gonna go ahead and peel that transfer tape off with your stencil. So you want to peel that transfer tape and your stencil off of the white backing, and you want to make sure you don't lose pieces like the inside of the E and the O. So I almost lost the inside of the E. I'm going to just gently push it back on to the tape. And I'm going to make sure I don't lose the inside of that O or the H. And so this should be emptied, and you can toss that in the garbage. And you should have your home stencil vinyl stuck to the transfer tape. Now you want to go ahead and line it up. It's up to you. You have a couple of places you can put it. You can kind of have it hover over this line in the middle. So you can have it where it's on the third pallet with the H kind of on the second pallet, or you can have it completely on one pallet or the other. So that's up to you. You can kind of place it where you want. I'm going to put mine on the second pallet. And I'm going to eyeball where it goes, trying to aim for it being middle. So I roughly have it centered. I have about a ½ inch on either side. And I'm going to press it down to make sure that the stencil vinyl sticks to the wood. And then I'm going to remove the transfer tape. Making sure that I don't chip the wood or the paint, and that I don't peel up the stencil. And again, you want to make sure you don't lose the inside of the E or the O or the H. And so you can take that transfer tape and discard it. And I'm just going to smooth down my stencil. Make sure, especially where the words are, that there's no bubbles or wrinkles. And now it's time to take the paint from your paint kit and your foam brush, and we're going to paint. And this time we're not aiming for a whitewash effect, we want it to be solid. So you want to use a generous amount of paint when painting. You want this to dry for a couple hours to make sure it's completely dry before peeling the stencil away. And since this is lettering, you really want the letters to be as solid as possible, so it doesn't hurt applying a second coat on this. So that's up to you. You can either do one coat or two, but either way, you want to make sure that it's dry before you do anything else and before you peel the stencil off. So we're going to set this aside and let it dry. So after letting the first coat of blue dry, I went ahead and applied a second coat, and I also let that dry. So now that the blue acrylic paint is completely dry, we can go ahead and remove this blue stencil vinyl. And we want to do it carefully so we don't chip our paint or our wood. And so we removed the stencil vinyl for the majority of the wood. And so all we have to do now is remove those inside parts. And this is where using a weeding tool or a paper clip or safety pin is helpful. You want to be careful that you're not accidentally removing the paint for the letter. And so after removing the blue stencil and those inner parts for some of the letters, you should have your finished sign. I'm going to go ahead and remove the stencil for my other sign. So again, depending on which way you used the Illinois shape, you're going to have two different versions of the sign. And so this is how this version of the sign would look. Hopefully, after following the steps in this video, you have at least one of the two versions of this sign, either the whitewashed, more rustic farmhouse version, or the more traditional farmhouse version. If you are going to put the signs outside, where they're going to get rained on or snowed on, we recommend sealing your signs with a krylon acrylic spray or another type of wood sealant to protect the wood and paints. If you liked this project and wanted to show us how you did, you can post about it on social media and tag us at AskElmhurst or #ElmhurstMakery. We hope you enjoyed the project and thanks for joining me.